A near-forgotten world in eastern Russia. 9 time zones and a good 6,000 kilometers from Moscow is Kamchatka, a peninsula in the Bering Sea. Its short summers are mild, but in the wintertime temperatures drop to below -30. Dozens of volcanoes spew ash and gas into the atmosphere. To this day, Kamchatka is home to numerous ethnic groups, such as the Itelmens, the Aloits, and the Koryaks.
It's very important to us to nurture our own way of life and to pass it on to our children. That's the only way to keep our traditions alive.
Kamchatka was closed to visitors for decades. The environment therefore remained largely untouched.
It's a battle, not just for survival. We're fighting to preserve what we've got here, because Kamchatka's environment is unique, and we have to protect it.
There's still no road to the Russian mainland. Those who want to get to Kamchatka have to go by boat or by plane. Kamchatka is home to around 400,000 people, though the region is larger than Germany. Most of the inhabitants live in the town of Petropavlovsk.
I know many people who've moved away. Most were people of the sea. They're returning during the season again in order to earn some money.
Kamchatka was closed for more than 60 years. While the indigenous population lived permanently on the peninsula, soldiers, fishermen and their families were only allowed to settle here for a limited period. In addition, Perestroika brought economic decline.
It was very tough for the people. Something had to be done in the 90s. You had to find a money-making niche, occupy it and build something for yourself.
To stay or to go. The first generation, those who were born here, are grown up now. They've built a livelihood for themselves. But what keeps people here at the end of the world? How did this remote spot become a home for so many migrants? Dawn. It's Saturday morning. The emissary of the Nordic peoples has a full schedule. First, Yulia Vasilyeva has to help a family with a problem. Then she has to visit relatives on the west coast. But before that, she heads into the undergrowth. Now, in late summer, is the best time to gather fungi. Yulia and her daughter Daria are members of the Itelmen people.
My grandmother took me to the forest to gather mushrooms and berries. Just like my grandchild now, I always watched. She showed me what was safe to eat and what not.
14-year-old Daria is at an age when young girls dream of becoming film stars or a career on the catwalks of the big cities.
I'd never leave Kamchatka. Maybe to go on holiday, but I'd always come back. This is my home. It's familiar to me. It's the best place on earth.
This quantity of fungi isn't unusual for Kamchatka. Everything nature provides, it provides plentifully. Yulia's destination is an Aloit family who live in the wilderness in the south of the peninsula. They breed sleigh dogs, but they don't have much to do except in wintertime. That's why they've invited Yulia. She represents the descendants of the indigenous population in the local parliament. And she knows how to get at the aid money of the Russian Federation. It's a matter of survival for the family. Their own money often doesn't suffice for dog breeder Andrei Semashkin, wife and their children. Andrei wants state funds for the dogs, and because there are only dog sleigh races in the wintertime, he has an idea for autumn. He wants to put on a child dog race with his dogs and the children, thereby reviving an ancient tradition. The dog sets the speed and pulls the little runners. These races used to take place during the Soviet era.
We used to have state support. A lot has changed, and we have to see how we get by on our own. Our dogs are our capital. We feed them, and they feed us.
The races are very popular. All the children from the surrounding area join in. We have to run and train a lot, they tell us. The dogs need to be exercised too. We want to know what they expect from this race. Prizes, they say. They don't yet know who's taken what place, but they think Olga is the fastest because she's got the fastest dog. Andrei has set up a yurt on his property. This is where people come together when important issues need discussing. Like in days gone by, the family members sit together in a circle around the fire. Yulia has an educational function because not everyone in the wilderness has access to television or the internet. That's why many don't know what rights and options they have.
It's very important for us to sit together like this and discuss our problems. We help each other. In the past, it was about fish. If someone had any to spare, it was shared. And it's the same with money today. If someone's in trouble, there's help. That's how we live together.
There's state funding available in Russia for indigenous people wishing to run projects. They just need to know how to access them. That's where Yulia helps.
I can give them advice about solving problems. They choose how to proceed, but I give them tips. And if they have good projects, I support them as much as possible.
During the Cold War, Kamchatka was the largest eastern outpost of the Warsaw Pact. In addition to the fish industry, the Red Army was therefore the most important employer. The people here have had to learn how to survive in a market economy. One of them was Dmitry Georgievich, the former soldier as a helicopter mechanic for a private airline. Burgeoning tourism in Kamchatka gives him a secure job. During the peak season in summer, he takes tourist groups to the national parks to go hiking or mountain climbing. The ancient machines need to be inspected before each flight.
That's for flight safety. It's no more dangerous than driving a car. A pedestrian can be hit by a rock. If you do your job properly, it'll be all right.
The pilot of the three-man helicopter crew is a young former soldier who immediately signed up with a private airline.
I think the development of tourism is great for Kamchatka. It means extra contracts for our business and secures our jobs. Kamchatka is a beautiful region. I'm happy that I can show this beauty to more and more people.
Helicopters are one of the most important modes of transport on Kamchatka. Dmitry and his crew are heading south today. Their destination is Kurila Lake, around an hour's flight and 400 kilometers from Petropavlovsk. Most tourists only come during the summer months. In the winter, snowstorms and freezing cold temperatures make flying impossible. Kamchatka's south has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since the 90s. Park inspectors live and work in the vast Nalichevo National Park, and they need to be supplied by helicopter because there's no developed road network. Slavo Alexeyev and just 8 other colleagues inspect an area of several hundred square kilometers. He spends most of his time out in the wild. One of his jobs is to conserve the flora and fauna and to count the wild animal population. Often he goes days without seeing another human being. Bears are his only neighbors here. Slavo has to document their behavior in detail.
This is the bears' main feeding ground. They eat all day long, fish from the river and blueberries from the tundra. I've counted 6 bears this year, 1 mother with 2 cubs and 3 individuals.
Slavo consciously chose to lead a life in the wilderness.
When you see this environment, you quickly realize that it has to be preserved. You don't get this anywhere else. I think I got this attitude from my parents. They taught me early on to respect the beauty of nature and to not destroy it.
There are regular problems with poachers. They usually come in groups. Slavo's powerless to stop them. Nalichevo National Park is surrounded by active volcanoes. Since scientists dug a hole 200 meters deep into the ground here more than 30 years ago, hot water has been flowing to the surface. It contains high concentrations of salts and minerals. Slavo lets the water drain in a controlled fashion, otherwise it would destroy the surrounding tundra.
There's always enough work. When I'm on my own, I feel lonely. I try to keep busy. This is my home. I spent more time here than in Petropavlovsk.
Slavo rarely has visitors. His wife only comes for a few weeks in the summer. He maintains a connection with the outside world via radio. He has to report to his office in Petropavlovsk once a day. Nothing much happens in the summer. Things only get critical in the winter, when he sometimes has to wait for the helicopter for days. Every 2 weeks, Slavo is relieved by a colleague.
I think that my family worries. It's not entirely risk-free, but they know me. A person is needed where he is born. I've got lots of relatives on the mainland, but I never have the urge to move there.
Those who want to build a permanent livelihood for themselves in Kamchatka have to be willing to make do without many creature comforts. Dmitry Georgievich and his crew are flying towards Kurila Lake. This huge body of water can also only be reached by helicopter. For a few years now, rangers with military training have been fighting poachers here. Since the state has been investing more money into protecting animals, Sergei Shoronov and his colleagues have chalked up some successes. Here too, the poachers have their sights set on the huge brown bears that roam the tundra around Kurila Lake. There's an abundance of food for them. The wealth of fish here is unique in the world. The poachers have set their eyes on bear paws and gallbladders for export to China.
The difficulty is that the bears here aren't frightened of people. As you can see, the animals come quite close to us. That's not typical. That only happens at Kurila Lake. If the bears let people come so close, they're easy prey for poachers.
The Kamchatka bear is one of the largest brown bears in the world. In addition to poachers, they're also the target of paying big game hunters in search of a spectacular trophy. The rangers can't be everywhere at once.
We want to preserve the environment for our children and grandchildren, not just for Russia, but for everyone. I've been here for 5 years now. You grow together with the environment here. I know every bear here. I meet them again every year. I know their offspring, and I see them grow up. It would be very hard for me to leave.
Shoronov and his colleagues are just too few to provide real protection for the bears. Dmitry uses the breaks between the flights to stock up. Fungi, the size of loaves of bread.
Where I come from, on the Volga, there isn't any work like this. I could work with cars. I could do all kinds of things. I could fix machines. But none of those things would be fun.
Since Kamchatka was closed for decades, the environment was able to flourish unhindered by human intervention. That makes it all the more important to protect this ecosystem today. It's hot under the ground in Kamchatka. There's no other place on Earth with this many active volcanoes. Experts from the Volcanological Institute in Petropavlovsk regularly climb into the craters. Hot and noxious gases shoot to the surface under enormous pressure. To the experts, the composition of the gases is key. It allows them to draw conclusions about future eruptions. Working in the craters isn't entirely risk-free. Tremors could happen at any moment. A colleague died here just a few years ago. There are 29 active volcanoes on Kamchatka. The experts register around 6 eruptions per year. On Sunday afternoon, Yulia and Daria reach Kamchatka's west coast. This is where Ivan Larin lives with his family. He's one of Yulia's cousins. Just like his ancestors, he also lives in a small hut right on the Sea of Okhotsk. His family live entirely off fishing. There's no electricity or running water. This place used to be home to lots of Itelmens, but their number is dwindling because the younger generation tend to move to the city. There are no creature comforts out here.
When people live in the city, they never have enough time. Life is so fast-paced that they don't manage to keep up. We lead quiet, peaceful lives here. We know exactly what we're going to do today and what to expect tomorrow. We know what we need and when we need it.
Ivan doesn't want to give up traditional fishing. He wants to be a role model to his children. And he's doing a great job. His wife Lena would never trade life in the wilderness for life in the city.
We're our own doctors. Nature heals us. Our son is 10 now, and he's had no more than 2 colds in 10 years. He got a cold once because he was in the city. He can run through the water barefoot here in the winter, regardless of how cold it is. It doesn't even give him a runny nose.
Ivan's 5 children are almost always in the fresh air. A discarded lorry has been appropriated as a playground. Ivan and his family are followers of a natural religion that originated here.
Here we have the totem poles that we sacrifice fish to and that we turn to when we need help. This is a sacred place for us, a place for the soul. We try to nurture our rituals and preserve our culture. That's why it's important to pass on our traditions to our children and grandchildren.
And so his children learn that they regularly have to sacrifice chunks of fish to the sea god Midg.
They do it right in their own way. I explain the ritual to them, and they give thanks in their own words.
Such rituals were frowned upon under the communists.
The biggest hurdle for us is a lack of understanding. People simply don't want to understand us. The authorities don't understand that we view life differently and have a closer relationship to nature. They're trying to force us into a box we don't want to be in. We don't understand why. That's the biggest hurdle.
Yulia and Daria set off for home in the evening. Monday is a school day after all. After work, helicopter mechanic Dmitry heats up his banya. He swears by the tradition of the Russian sauna.
Talking with friends is very important. We don't see each other all week, but then we meet in the banya. Russians have always solved all their problems in the sauna. If one of us has a problem, we meet in the sauna.
A real Russian sauna needs careful preparation. This includes dried birch branches that Dmitry first soaks in cold water. Gennady, an old friend from his military days, has come to visit. It's a welcome change for Dmitry. The banya visit follows strict rituals.
You always have to drink a beer before getting into the sauna.
How hot?
80 before I close the flue.
After the first refreshment, they're ready. After every trip to the sauna, they return to the sofa. The men prefer to talk about the past.
I finished my military service when I was 33. I was a strong, healthy man at the time and still very capable of working on the helicopter. In 1998, I stopped and thought, where can I go? There's no work. Finally, I found work in civilian aviation, and I'm still here working in my job.
Dmitry lives alone since his divorce.
I still feel like a Soviet person. It's a habit. I once took an oath. I like it here. Too many people move away, but they come back again too. That's Kamchatka. It draws people in.
The only city here, Petropavlovsk, lies on the east coast of Kamchatka. It's home to around 200,000 people. That's more than half the population of Kamchatka. The summer holidays end in the whole of Russia on the first Monday in September. Six-year-old Anya Ivakova is starting a new phase in life. She'll be going to school for the first time today. Her mother is making sure she looks particularly smart for the occasion.
I'm doing her hair so she'll be the most beautiful one today. That's a tradition on the first day of school. The hair is curled and two big bows are put in the hair.
Anya's father, Mikhail, only returned from 6 months at sea a few days ago. He's a fisherman like many other people here.
When you were at sea for long, it's nice to come home. I see how much my daughter has grown and how beautiful my wife is. I'm very happy that they are so glad to see me. It's a good feeling when you come back from being at sea.
Anya has learned a poem off by heart for the first day of school. My parents are excited, she tells us. They didn't sleep the whole night. They're worried about me. Anya is their only child. Mikhail is a member of the Chukchi people. Olga, on the other hand, is Russian. That's quite common in Petropavlovsk. Most descendants of the indigenous population have assimilated. Traditionally, the 1st of September is the Day of Knowledge in Russia. New school children go to school for the first time all over the country. The same is true here in school number 2 in faraway Kamchatka. Discipline needs to be learned early on. In rows of 2, the little ones march out to celebrate on the playground. The ceremony is conducted by older students. Anya is allowed to ring the symbolic school bell. We will work very hard, this boy proclaims, and confidently continues. Once we've started, we'll achieve great things. The Day of Knowledge is a tradition from the Soviet era, as is the pathos. In Russia, the children learn together until year 11. The graduation report is necessary for a university place. Almost 100 children are starting school for the first time in school number 2 today. That's more than ever before in the post-Soviet era. It's a sign of change, says teacher Natalia Vlasikova.
We've got lots of jobs here now that don't have anything to do with fishing anymore. Every child has to have a good education regardless of where in Russia they live.
The young people in Petropavlovsk need variety. To prevent them from just hanging about on the streets, the system of promoting sports was taken over from the Soviet era. The up-and-coming biathlon stars are training in Petropavlovsk's Olympic Center. The youth of Kamchatka are getting fit. In the summer, they use rollerblades instead of skis. One of the athletes here is 17-year-old Anna. She wants to have a career in sports.
I want to become a PE teacher. I'm training hard to be successful. I'm hardworking and try to never miss a session. I want to achieve more.
The Olympic Center is being funded by a state-owned gas company. It wants to turn Kamchatka into an international biathlon center. The snowy winters would provide perfect conditions.
I think I have a future here because biathlon is developing well in Kamchatka. Sports facilities are being built and soon the junior championships will take place here.
Up to 10 meters of snow fall here in the wintertime, ideal conditions for winter sports. Avacha Bay is Kamchatka's gateway to the world. It gets its name from the biggest river on the peninsula, which flows into the Pacific here. Everything the people need to live is imported via the ice-free harbour. The bay is also home to a large fishing fleet. Around 600,000 tons of fish are taken from the ocean every year. Fish is the livelihood for the majority of the people here, and that's true too for Mikhail Ivakov.
Fishing is hard work. We don't get days off. It all depends on the captain and on how he stores the catch on the ship. It's important to distribute everything evenly so the ship doesn't capsize in rough conditions.
Mikhail is applying to work on a trawler for the coming season in spring. He's meeting with his future employer, Captain Sergei Kostil. Mikhail's wages for 6 months' work will be $20,000. It's decent pay. Captain Kostil had no trouble finding enough workers.
It's 100% attractive work. That's why people now stay here. Our society has overcome the difficult crisis of the 90s. We're still doing well. In some fields, we're doing better than other parts of Russia.
Mikhail's wife, Olga, helps out in a souvenir shop. Now that Anya's going to school every day, she can work a little bit more. She has mixed feelings about her husband's job.
It's particularly bad when there's something on the news. Then I really worry about my husband. He's at sea for half a year and there are always bad storms, but he's chosen this job and we have to live with it.
These mementos are particularly popular with Russian tourists. Indigenous folklore made in China.
We have different souvenirs. This sun is from the Ebony. It protects whoever wears it. Kut is the god of the Koryaks, the god of Kamchatka. He stands for eternal life.
The people are turning back to ancient traditions. At the National Academy of Art and Music, the children of Kamchatka can learn the old songs and dances. Daria also regularly practices them. She's a passionate dancer.
I like being on stage and I want to learn to dance the way our ancestors danced. Everyone in our family danced because we're Itilmens. I want to continue this tradition and pass it on to the next generation.
Trained at the National Academy, the children and young people can later perform in front of paying tourists. But how much this still has to do with the original tribal dances is for the beholder to decide. In the bay around Petropavlovsk, a few Itilmen fishermen fish in the traditional manner. They've set up small camps with tents, cars and transporters. Slavo Shukin spends most of his time here in summer. He sells the fish in the town's markets. But that's hardly enough to survive on, because every year the fishing quotas are reduced. A law of the Russian Federation permits the indigenous population to fish for their own consumption. The constantly reduced quotas are justified on conservation grounds. At the same time, big businesses are making huge profits. The representative of the Nordic peoples, Yulia Vasilyeva, knows the problem. She speaks to the fishermen as often as she can. She also fights a tireless battle with the authorities to demand higher quotas.
The fishing of the commercial businesses is more greatly respected than that of the indigenous population for their own consumption. But they need that for their traditional way of life in order to have enough fish for the family in the winter.
They're reduced to fishing for prawns. Together with a colleague, Slavo wants to check the traps he's put out in the bay, but it's still a bit too early for prawns. The prawns only seek shelter in the bay when the autumn and winter storms start.
I only catch prawns now and I'm not catching very many. I throw the small ones back into the water to let them grow. Usually my net is half full. I get 20 to 30 prawns, but today I've only got 4 or 5.
Slavo and his colleagues also believe that the authorities favour the big businesses. Kamchatka's gold. That's what the people here call caviar and red salmon. Only local goods are sold, caught primarily by commercial big businesses. Those who aren't dependent on fishing quotas are the lucky ones. On the outskirts of Petropavlovsk is Yevgeny Shukarev's fish smokehouse. He came to Kamchatka as a doctor in 1988, but doctors were poorly paid, even after the communist era. Shukarev set up his own business. The red gold is now the basis of his business.
We currently have around 50 tons in stock. It's all salmon. There are further fish species such as herring. It's all local. From Kamchatka's west and east coasts.
After the collapse of communism, there were supply problems in Kamchatka. Despite the many natural resources, lots of people went back to the mainland. Shukarev discovered smoked fish as a gap in the market and stayed.
It was a difficult situation. There was branded food and the prices were fixed. I was only able to make money when the fixed price system ended. Then there was raging inflation. We'd never experienced anything like it. If something cost a ruble in the morning, it was double that by noon, and 3 times that by the evening.
Shukarev employs 12 people and now has an annual turnover of $2 million with his business. He can afford to send both of his daughters to an English private school.
I built all of this on my own, and I don't see any point in moving elsewhere. I am not interested in cities. It's quieter and nicer here.
Shukarev supplies Kamchatka's supermarkets as well as those on the Russian mainland. He would like to export to the EU, but that's not possible because of strict regulations. Shukarev has learned one thing from the bad times in the early 90s. He swears by self-sufficiency. He farms on his plot for himself and his employees.
This is like an insurance policy for me, but I like it too. When I wake up in the morning and the cock crows, life begins. It's a new day. It's music to my ears.
The inhabitants of the volcanic island trust that their children will also have a future here. The wild, pristine environment is Kamchatka's capital. Flourishing tourism is creating new jobs. It gives Dmitry and his colleagues a livelihood. The descendants of the indigenous population, such as Daria and her mother, are committed to preserving their traditions. The people in Kamchatka have had to rediscover their home in order to grasp its beauty. Even if life at the end of the world sometimes requires privation, it's in the hands of the people. They will decide Kamchatka's future.